Good morning, Lifestyle is Lifers. It's Vicky Midwood here, the Alcohol Addiction and Disordered Eating Eliminator. And for those of you who don't know who I am, I help people to overcome the need, the desire, the obsession, the compulsion to use food, alcohol, or both to manage life, emotions, stress, and just basically get through the day. So I've been doing this for a long time because it was my own story. And today I want to share with you some myths slash rules slash ideas, beliefs that we pick up when we're kids and we still hang on to them. These are some of the things that come up time and time again when I'm working with my clients who have either got bulimia, binge eating disorder, or are emotional eaters or stress eaters and or drinkers. And one of these rules is really powerful, and I posted about it as a written post, and I just thought, you know what, I need to talk about it because people are responding that it is still a thing. And in this day and age, it just seems really bizarre that we have got this mindset still that you need to clean your plate. Now, when I was a kid, the story behind it was clean your plate because there's people starving in Africa. And this was when there was a lot of TV footage showing the most harrowing pictures of famine that we'd ever seen. And this was at the time where Live Aid happened because of what we were being shown on the media. And so you can understand that, you know, there was this idea that we're living in an opulent world where when we look just across to other countries, you know, the story is really, really different. Now, the premise behind cleaning your plate, folks, actually came from our parents' parents, right? And I'm talking about my generation now. So I'm in my 50s. Those of you in your 50s, 60s, and 70s will have been taught the same because our parents' parents were of the war era, right, where there was rationing. And so they were never actually sure how much food was going to be available. And so the idea was that, you know what, you might have to wait a long time for the next meal. So eat what you've got. Now, that makes complete sense. There wasn't the food around when there was rationing to waste anything. We used to, and if you look back on some of the amazing cookbooks and some of the people who were helping people to learn how to stretch the food that they could get their hands on to make more meals out of it, you can understand why nothing did go to waste, because we couldn't get the food, right, to feed our people. It's as simple as that. Same idea when we had, the potato famine in Ireland. So when there's been a food shortage, it makes sense that parents are going to say to their kids, you need to eat what's on your plate and don't waste food, right? So there was a reason behind it. Now, what has happened is obviously, and as you all know, we repeat what our parents say. Sometimes we hate the fact that we do, because I'm sure all of us at some point remember thinking as a kid, I'm never going to say that when I'm an adult. And then you find yourself saying exactly that. And I know I have, much to my own chagrin, but there you go. So, and that's one of them. Now, I actually have never said that to my child because I know that it's really ridiculous, because here's the problem. We don't have food shortages in this country. The fact that you stuff yourself because you're eating everything on your plate means that you are overriding your body's natural I am full up signals. And when you override those natural full up signals consistently, you are teaching your body that it requires more food than it actually does. And this is where it's very easy and very simple to see how we can put on weight. We don't put on weight. Most people do not get obese or even overweight because they're eating a shit ton of food and they're eating all day long at every single meal, right? But if you're overeating beyond fullness on a consistent, regular basis over time, that is going to add up to stones, right? Over months and over years. And it's not rocket science. The craziness is that we as adults, as parents, need to understand that our kids do not need to have big portions, right? They're not adults. And I see it so often when people are dishing out for 2 kids and a mum and dad, that everybody kind of gets more or less the same on their plate. Well, that's bonkers. Yeah, a 13, 14 stone guy does not need, sorry, a 9 stone woman does not need the same amount of food as a 13, 14 stone guy. And a 4 or 5 stone kid certainly does not need the same amount of food as a 9 stone woman or a 14 stone guy. And yet we are giving kids almost the same portions as we are having. It happens in restaurants a lot. I see it when kids go out to eat, unless they specifically are ordering off the child's menu, in which case then the restaurant will know it's for a child and purposely make it a smaller portion. But even then, it's usually too much food when you go out. Why? Because there's this perception that you need to get value for money. So when you're going out to eat, a portion is not what your body, that portion you're served is not necessarily what your body needs. It probably might need a half of it. It might only need a third of it. Right? If we're talking about a bowl of pasta, right, which is very cheap for a restaurant to produce, you've got a massive bowl that's overflowing and you look at it and go, oh, wow, look at that. Yeah, you don't need probably a quarter of that as a portion. And yet people feel that if it's in front of them and they've paid for it, they should eat it, even though their tummy and their waistband is saying, no, stop, I've had enough. The problem is that this then leads you into that dieting mentality that somehow you've got to restrict and not eat enough or what you think is enough. And we get this crazy cocked up idea about what is a portion, what we should be eating, what we shouldn't be eating. And then we back up our belief with the story that, well, I don't want to waste food. Well, how about you save it for the next day and save it for another meal, right? Because you don't have to waste food. Or how about you get into the habit of just cooking less and realizing that if consistently there is always food left over on everybody's plate, it's kind of a clue that you're serving them way too much. So cut the amount of food that you're serving right down. It's not rocket science, but it is a change of behavior. And this follows through. So I wanted to touch on other things because it kind of follows through that not only were we taught to clear our plate, or I was in my era, by people at school as well as at home, but also if you cleaned your plate, you could have pudding. So basically, stuff yourself full of food, and then I'll give you more food that's amazingly calorie dense on top of that. Right. So, and how is that helping the people in Africa? And so when you look at it from a logical point of view, it's just bonkers. But this is the stuff that sticks in our brain. Why? Because we hear it so many times and because we want to be good children. And so we do what we're told. And chances are that you might have actually been physically punished or verbally reprimanded if you didn't do that. And you hear horror stories about kids being made to sit at the table until they have eaten everything on their plate. And if they don't, it gets presented to them at the next meal. That's child abuse, folks. But that was often seen as the norm, especially in private school environments. So this stuff sounds like it's something out of the ark, but it still does go on in some families, and it really screws up our relationship with our body, with understanding our own sensations of fullness, of satisfaction, of knowing when you have actually nourished your body and you can say, that's fine, I don't need any more right now. Other things in our childhood that can have a similar effect, and I think this is really important, is a really kind of profound one for me anyway, was this idea, and I touched on this on a few of my lives before, is that I was often scared to ask a question because the response would be, but you should know that. It's like, I can't know something that I've never been taught or I've never learned. And I, like most kids, they ask a lot of whys, don't they? Because they're trying to learn about the world and why things happen and why they are what they are. And oftentimes when somebody says, just do this or you should know it, it leads to that sense of you then questioning, well, am I stupid? Why don't I know it? Should I actually know it? Oh my God, Do I need to go and ask somebody else? But no, I can't ask somebody else because they'll think that I'm stupid as well. And so then you're in this quandary about, well, you don't actually know, but then you're going to try and pretend that you do know. And guess what? You probably get into trouble because you're doing it wrong. So there's this craziness that we have just from the sentences, the language that we hear from our families or from school. You know, I heard that so many times, not necessarily to me, but definitely to other kids at school. And don't forget, when I was at school, we didn't really understand anything about learning difficulties. People who have, you know, anything like dyscalculia or dyspraxia or dyslexia, they weren't terms that even probably anybody had heard of. Certainly not in my school. You were just called lazy or stupid, and probably given a clip round the ear of for not actually knowing stuff. And they probably heard it all the time. So if you hear this stuff in the classroom, even if it's not actually directed at you, you take it on board that you should know stuff and you should be able to do stuff, even though as a kid you're going, but I don't actually know. But now I can't admit that I don't know because then they'll think I'm stupid or lazy. This is the stuff that creates low self-worth, that creates issues with our self-confidence, that stops us from speaking out and asking questions. And that leads me on to the third one that I want to talk about, which was don't say anything unless you've been asked. You know, that whole children should be seen and not heard, or don't speak until I tell you to. Well, hang on a minute. What if I need to ask a question? What if I need to clarify something? I have to wait until you give me permission to speak. But what if you don't? What if you're too wrapped up in your conversation with somebody else and you forget about me? So what's the lesson from that? The lesson is that what I've got to say isn't worth listening to. The lesson is that what I have to ask is not important. Therefore, that gets interpreted as I'm not important. Other people are more important than me. And if this was the story that went on in your childhood like it did in mine, you can see why our feelings of self-worth just gently get chipped away year by year. We keep hearing the same stuff. And as I say, it doesn't actually have to always be directed at you. It could be directed to a sibling. It could be something that is said to one of your parents by another parent. But this is the stuff that we pick up and we take on board. This is the stuff that we talk about when we're talking about unhelpful limiting beliefs, and they get lodged in our subconscious brain. And this is the stuff that we need to actually bring out from the stuff in the background there that's always lurking, but is actually ruling what we are doing, how we are choosing, and how we are living our lives, but also passing on stuff to others. If we can start to get that stuff out and actually look at it and just pick it to pieces and just go, actually, that's bonkers. When you think about it, the only reason that things like that were said to us as kids was so that our parents could have some sense of being in control. And don't forget, nobody's got a book. No one knows the best way to parent, right? We can only do the best that we can do with the knowledge that we have in that moment. That's all that we have. We can look back and go, okay, you know what? I could have perhaps done that differently, so next time I will. A lot of people, though, don't realize, and I know that my parents certainly didn't realize, and a lot of families of my era and still younger don't have a clue the effects that something just said glibly, right, but often is taken very, very personally and very, very seriously, and actually affects how we think and feel as adults moving forward. So what I wanted to just talk about was to highlight this stuff really, and how you can be aware of what are those childhood rules that were used really to keep you minding your manners, behaving yourself, being quiet when your parents want to do whatever, however you want to look at it. They were used to make sure that you towed the line and did what your parents wanted you to do. Also to teach you some kind of sense of social manners and conditioning and all that stuff. Nothing was malicious behind it. But think about the ones that actually now have created a misalignment or a disconnect between you and your body. Think about the ones that have also created a misalignment or a disconnect to be between self-love and your self-worth. Because those are the things that if you can start to be honest about and start to ask yourself, actually, I know I learned this when I was a kid and it was useful to me then, but is it still useful to me now? Or actually, is it stopping me from being the person that I want to be, from having the relationship with food and my body that I want to have, from having the relationship with other people that I want to have? Is it stopping me from stepping into being the business owner that I want to be? Is it stopping me from jumping in and trying new activities because I'm telling myself that I don't know enough, that I'm not good enough, that people will think I'm stupid? So look at what are the stories you are telling yourself and see if you can relate those back to some of those rules that you heard when you were a kid. I'd be fascinated to know what you discover. If you want to share what you've found out, I'd love it if you can post something below here. And if you do want to get in touch with me for any issues that you may have with bulimia, with binge eating, with alcohol dependence, with stress or emotional eating, or with anxiety and low self-worth, or body image issues, which all kind of go together, then please do get in touch with me. You can find me on my website, that's vickymidwood.com, or you can message me on Facebook. I'm on Facebook as Vicky Midwood, as the Alcohol Addiction and Disordered Eating Eliminator. You can also connect with me on Instagram. I'm Vicky_Go Figure Coaching, and I am on LinkedIn as Vicky Midwood as well. I'd love to hear from you. And if you do have any comments or questions that you would like to ask, then pop them in the comment box, because I will come back and revisit this post, and I'm more than happy to respond to you in there as well. Have a lovely woohoo Wednesday, folks. Whatever you get up to, enjoy it, and I'll speak to you on another live very, very soon.